Hello and welcome back to the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. In 1966, through a chance meeting in an LA traffic jam, Stephen Stills and Neil Young discovered they shared a similar musical ambition and formed Buffalo Springfield. Filled with differing personalities and varied musical characteristics, the five members of Buffalo Springfield headed to the studio to record an album that would play an integral part in bridging the gap between 60s pop and 70s folk rock. Joining me to discuss this album is my co-host, Mr. Felipe Amarim. How you doing, man?
Doing great, man, and you?
Good, yeah, very well, thank you. Welcome back, everyone. We'll start off with the terms and conditions. We just like to throw a couple of little ones in there. If you're listening to us on Apple, Spotify, or Amazon, please do us a massive favour and rate and review the show. Scroll down, give us 5 stars, write a little sentence what you love about it, and hit submit. It does the world of good for us because it means we get seen by more people and flies us up the charts. It takes 20 seconds of your time, but really is, valuable to us. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe to stay up to date with new episodes and new content. So, Buffalo Springfield.
Can I just add one term and
Sure.
condition? Yeah. If you're listening to this in the year 3000 and there is time travel, please just come back and tell us how fucking great we are. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Tell us how great we're going to be by that time, Cool. Buffalo Springfield. Have you heard of these guys?
I've heard of them, and but never listened to the albums. They only did 3 albums. That it.
Yeah, and then they all went on their separate
obviously,
journeys.
I know Stills and Young. Everyone knows those guys. But I knew they had a band. That kind of shit. I never actually spent the time to listen to the album, and I'm really impressed.
Yeah, it's very good, isn't it? All right, I'll just start off with some quick fire album facts. So the album was released in October 1966, recorded between July and September 66 at the Gold Star Hollywood Studios, but one song, For What It's Worth, was recorded at the Columbia Studios. The genre is folk rock and the length is just under 33 minutes, released on the Atco label and produced by Charles Green and Brian Stone. So, I think we'll start off. We want to talk a lot about the music about this in this episode because there's just such a varied amount of songs and styles. It's so good. But we'll just give a bit of background context because it's quite important when you talk about the lyrics later on. So, in terms of the band, Stephen Stills and Richie Furay. Actually, let's talk about the band quickly. So, in the band, you have Stephen Stills on vocals, guitars, keyboards, who was known as being a really polished songwriter, really good at writing those pop and rock hooks. Neil Young on vocals, guitars, harmonica, and piano. And Neil's reputation at the time was quite infamous, if you like. He had this raw, experimental style, a very distinctive voice, a very distinctive guitar style as well. Then you had Richie Furay on vocals and rhythm guitars, who was known for, being a good blender of styles, as well as quite a smooth vocalist. And then you had Bruce Palmer on bass and Dewey Martin on drums, who were both sort of solid rhythm section players. So that was the band. But interestingly, this is quite a funny story, the meeting of the band, because Stills and Furay were working together in the folk scene of New York at that time. It was the Greenwich Village, which is obviously infamous for that time. They were playing with different bands. Stills was playing with a band called the Ow Go-Go Singers, and Furay was playing with the Squires. Now, Stills wanted Neil Young in the band beforehand, but he had no way of contacting him or even sort of, just saying, come and audition for us. I don't know if you know the story, and this will be good for listeners and viewers. In April 1966, they, who was it? Stills and Furay were stuck in a traffic jam in Los Angeles, and they saw Neil Young in his 1953 Pontiac hearse, along with Bruce Palmer.
The car matters.
The car matters, because they spotted
imagine
it.
the scene.
Yeah.
Imagine the scene
of what a hearse, yeah.
That car.
But they pulled alongside. They sort of, I don't know how you do that in LA traffic, but they got their cars next to each other and just started talking. And they found that they had a very similar ambition of music. They both wanted to do the same. I say both. There was 4 of them. All of them just had this ambition and this drive and this longing to make some original music that sort of could bring these musicians together. And Buffalo Springfield was formed. And then 2 months later, they were in the studio recording their first album.
Amazing.
Very cool, isn't it? In terms of a bit of context of folk music, so this is why this album's really important. Because folk music, prior to this, so you're only talking 4 or 5 years ago, folk music was completely acoustic. You had people like Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Pete Seeger, all playing this acoustic folk music that was very politically driven. You know, we did this when we did the Bob Dylan album a few episodes ago. But it all changed in 1965 with Bob Dylan's Bring It All Home album and his Newport Folk Festival appearance, because that's the day he used electric instruments. And that moment in folk music is quite significant because it's the catalyst that showed, well, hold on, folk music doesn't just have to be acoustic guitars anymore.
Yeah, but
let's
some
show
people
what we
quite
could do.
Offended by that, isn't it? You can't play folk music with electric instruments.
What do you mean you can't? What do you mean you can only play folk on acoustic? But this occasion, this development in folk and this catalyst of moving folk on, then sparked a big emergence of folk music. You know, we already know what was going on in New York City, but then in LA, and in particular a place called the Laurel Canyon, became a hub for like creative musicians. And you had bands like the Byrds, Mamas and Papas, Love, all doing this new kind of electrified, revitalized folk music coming out of the Laurel Canyon scene. And in the mid-60s, it was the increase of bands and musicians blending genres. You would have blues bleed into folk, you would have country and psychedelia mixed together with rock. And it was just this hub, this little passage of time in LA where people realized folk can be more than just acoustic guitars.
Interesting.
And so that's the musical background context. Let's just talk politics as well. Obviously, 1960s, you've got the civil rights movement, fight for racial equality. You've got the March on Washington in 1963, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And many musicians at that time, we know Bob Dylan was incorporating themes of injustice, inequality, racism, all this sort of stuff. Obviously, we've also got the Vietnam War as well, escalating at that time. Counterculture movement, where we had the youth of America rejecting societal norms, and they weren't really taking the conservative values. They were like, hold on, no, we just want peace, we want love, we want communal living, we want hippiness, basically, to sum it up. And because of this, there was a massive social upheaval in LA, where you had the clash between the law and the government and the youth of the counterculture. And this actually resulted in what's known as the Sunset Strip riots of 1966, where they clashed, where the police clashed with young people because they were protesting curfews and restrictions of the time. There you go. That's your background context of everything, specifically to Buffalo Springfield, musically and politically, of the landscape of LA at that time. And we've just spent 5 minutes on that because it's quite important when you talk about the lyrics and we see, we can talk about the music, and when you talk about the lyrics, how the politics was involved and how it's reflected in the lyrics. So let's talk about the album, man. I mean, where do you want to start?
Yeah, I don't know. It's difficult, isn't it?
Can I start? Can I suggest something?
Yeah, please.
I just, one of the things I said in the intro little paragraph, and this is the point that I really want to touch on most. When I heard this band and when I was told the members in it, my mind immediately went, okay, I think it's going to sound like this. And what this is Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Neil Young, Townes Van Zandt. You know, those kind of
Nash.
This kind of singer-songwriter meets folk meets country. That little package. What I didn't expect was the longest song to be 3.5 minutes.
Yeah.
I didn't expect the plethora, and I don't know of any way, I'll just call it a plethora of 60s pop songs.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is songs that if the vocals had been different, it could be a Beatles song.
Yeah.
Go and Say Goodbye reminded me of You Like Me Too Much by the Beatles. Sit Down, I Think I Love You reminded me of I Should Have Known Better by the Beatles. Do I Have to Come Right Out and Say It? Again, was just another one of that 60s pop. Just really simple, short songs, great hooks, catchy choruses, lovely melodies, agreeable chord progressions, all summed up into a little 2.5 minute song.
Yeah, well, you've mentioned the Beatles. It could be like they do sound like the Byrds, they do sound like the Kinks or Beach Boys, because everyone was doing the same sort of. Well, I wouldn't say the same sort of sound, but there was an atmosphere in terms of the guitar effects and the vocal harmonies. There's a style, that everyone was kind of using at the time.
Yeah.
And I had the same impression as you. I was expecting an album that would be mainly acoustic guitar and like really long lyrics, about life and stuff. And I was quite surprised by Neil Young's guitar playing the whole album.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, when you're in a band, when you're not the only songwriter and you play an instrument, you can be more of an instrumentalist and less of an artist, like in a certain way. I think that in this album, it wasn't only about him. So Stephen Stills wrote loads of the songs in the album, and I think Neil Young was like, "Okay, that's your song. All I need to do is to play the guitar."
Great point.
And so his guitar playing this album is unlike anything I've heard of him. It's really good.
No, that's absolutely fine. I think every song has a moment of guitar on there that stands out. And what I mean by that, let's just go through it, man. The first song, For What It's Worth, you know those guitar harmonics right at the start of the song?
Yeah. I love that.
It's brilliant, isn't it? Because it got me to thinking.
Two notes. He plays two notes over and over, and that's like
that's the hook of the song. Yeah, it's perfect.
And it creates the tension. You can imagine the people in the streets when they hear that.
The same song, you've got that unusual guitar effect, lots of delay and reverb on this solo, plus little motifs here and there. Track 2, you've got really country guitar solos. Track 3, you've got really super distorted guitar solo at the end, or kind of in the middle at the end, and it just doesn't. It shouldn't fit. but the fact that it's an experimental and in places psychedelic album allows it to fit. In track 5, the guitar's trying to sound like a sitar. In track 8, Burned, the guitars are made to sound like a honky-tonk piano. There's some effect that they've done just behind in the verses where the guitar has that little clicky, texture to it. At the end, they actually use a piano, but I just think, why didn't you just use it at the start?
Because they could experiment.
Yeah, they could, exactly.
If you can do it, why not?
Then track 10, again, very heavy, distorted guitar tone. Hendrixy, Clapton-y, and literal shredding in the solo at the end. Track 11, the psychedelic guitar intro with effects and delay and reverb again. And I think that's it in terms of just, that's nearly 7 songs I've gone through where the guitar sounds different and is utilizing a different effect.
Yeah.
But still achieving a cohesive album when you get to the end of it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because do you know one interesting thing? Like, we talked about how American music influenced British music, and you have it happening the other way around with this album. Because, after the British took American music and made it more psychedelic, more experimental, you have these guys in LA.
Yeah.
Listening to I think they were listening to the British blues music as well, like all the British invasion, and then they incorporated that style. So that is it's interesting how the influence from both sides of the pond. It's like you have this American music influencing British bands, and British bands influencing American bands. It's great.
It's like it's like, we'll take your influence, give us 5 years to do something with it, and then we'll give it back to you. And then you see what you do with that. But it's brilliant. I hear completely what you're saying, and like I said right at the start, those 3 tracks that just remind me so much of the Beatles. It really could be. You get AI to change Stills' voice to John Lennon or Paul McCartney, and that is just a Beatles song. I think the chord progression, the melodies, how quickly they go into a song, it's just really nice.
You can also compare it to Pink Floyd's first album, The Piper of the Gates of Dawn. Pink Floyd's first album, the whole album, the vibe of the album. So it's like it's the kind of vocals and psychedelic sounds. Pink Floyd's first singles as well, like Arnold Lane is a good one. It's not on the album, I guess. It's a single.
Okay, well, what I'll do, just for new listeners and viewers, what we do is we have a dedicated playlist to the show. So any song, so the full album will be in there, as well as any song we've mentioned. So I've mentioned a few Beatles. I'm going to put in Astro Dominine.
That's an instrumental one.
I'll just put it in. Sorry,
that's not an instrument. That's a great one. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's a great one.
Scroll down in the show notes, and underneath our little description, you will see the link to the playlist. So go, and if we mention a song, you can listen to the one on the album, listen to the song we mention, and then you're up to date with how we're thinking. But the other thing is that I always, and I make no apology for it, I always come back to when I talk when we talk about blending of styles, I always come back to the Animals, because as brilliant as they were, what we noticed and identified with the Animals in kind of 64, 65 was if they wanted to write an R&B song, it would sound like an R&B song. If they wanted to write a blues song, it would sound like a blues song. This really has to be, and I feel like I say this every time we find a band that sort of blends styles, this really has to be one of the most impressive blends of an album, because there's just hints of things everywhere. If you listen to the rhythm guitar in most songs, if you really just isolate and get your ears to just listen to the guitar, it's so country-esque.
Yeah.
Twangy tone, maybe some finger picking, country licks, but these aren't country songs. I mean, one of them maybe. Which one?
Go and Say Goodbye is proper country in terms of instrumentation for me.
Yeah, that one. Yeah,
it's really country. The rhythm, the guitar, everything in it is really country.
I think one of tracks 6 or 7, Everybody's Wrong or Flying on the Ground is Wrong, just has that country feel, like you said, like with track 2, Go and Say Goodbye.
But, there's one interesting song, Leave, right at the end of the album, is a blues.
Yep. Yes,
and that one is the only, in my opinion, the only known experimental song in the album.
Yeah, it feels quite
safe. Blues in the
yeah, it feels quite safe. But you say that, and I agree with you. But if we look at what else was happening with blues in 1966 over in England, we had Cream, which only a couple of weeks ago we did Fresh Cream, and I think it's brilliant to see the difference. And I just think that if you identify these two albums and these two bands, and you look at Cream with Fresh Cream and Buffalo Springfield with their debut album, they sound so similar in so many ways. But what's different about Buffalo Springfield's, that I can just say one word: America. It is American. There are hints of America in it, whether that's the country guitar solos, the accent, even the singing accent. Whereas Cream, the differences in that are the British side of it. It's just brilliant, man. It's just so cool to see on two different sides of the world the same product of what's been going on musically for the past 5 years back then, and the different results we get.
Yeah, and it's there's something interesting about this, which is like when I talk about Cream and loads of those bands, they were into showing how good they were as musicians. And this album, it's about the songs. They spent a lot of time finding the right sounds, I guess. So the production is great, the playing is phenomenal, but it's all there to serve the composition. It's all about the lyrics and the melodies. In the end, it's interesting. You have like that amazing guitar playing throughout the whole album, but it's still about the lyrics. Also, I think the all the different genres that you've mentioned, they are really well mixed. There's a really good balance of everything. There's not too much. Like I've mentioned Pink Floyd's first album, it's too psychedelic. It's too much. Okay. In a good way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because obviously there's no folk or country in it. There's none of the elements we're talking about here.
Yep.
But I think every single thing in the album, like there's the right amount of folk, country, 60s rock, and the right amount of guitar playing is so well balanced that if you like one of those genres and you dislike the others, you can still listen to the album. Yeah,
because the album comes together cohesively. Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah. Another musical aspect of it that I thought was really interesting and probably quite, I don't want to say unusual because maybe it wasn't because the Beatles were doing it, but the intricacy of the vocal harmonies.
Yeah.
Because you had 3 solid singers in this group. With Beatles, obviously you had Paul and John, but even with the Beatles,
the harmonies are more country, isn't it?
They're much more complex. Instead of just the obvious interval of where you sing, of how the Beatles might have done it, it's very more intricate, and you can hear this lay the foundations for bands like Eagles, Grateful Dead to come in and really just nail those American country harmonies. But you've got it here throughout the album as well. I mean, the one that impressed me was Out of My Mind, the second to last song, where most of the song is like being sung in harmony, so much so that one note I have here is, apart from the obvious effects on the guitar, the most obvious use of production in the album is halfway through Out of My Mind, where they do something to the instruments. It's like literally they just turn it down so that the emphasis is on the vocals and the harmonies. And I thought that was just a really nice way to draw attention to the vocals in a very simplistic manner. It's like, right, we want you to listen to the vocals, so we're going to turn down all the instruments and please just listen to the voices.
Yeah. Isn't it great?
Yeah, it's great. I've really enjoyed it. And musically, you know, going from one song to another and having a different style to sink your teeth into, song to song, it gets
I've
on my
listened to it
toes.
2 times in a row because it's a short album
Yeah.
as well. Like if you listen to it 2 times, it's like 64 minutes.
Yeah, just 1 hour, 1 hour, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
The only other thing I wanted to say musically about this is that we were talking about at the time having bands like the Byrds and other contemporaries. You have to remember that in this time, the album had only just 1 year prior been established, so to speak. We did, you know, go back and listen to our episode on Rubber Soul by the Beatles, where that was the moment in contemporary music history where a band said, hold on, we're not going to focus on giving you 10 great singles that have nothing to do with each other. We're going to link all these songs into a cohesive album. And you had bands like the Byrds who were quite heavily relying on Bob Dylan covers and just releasing singles. And then you have this album come along, which, although song to song varies stylistically here and there, it's a cohesive piece of work.
Yeah.
And I think what makes it cohesive is going to be the lyrical content. And do you want to get into that now then?
Yes. Let's go into that now. We can start talking about For What It's Worth, because it's
perfect. Great.
Yeah, and also just making a link between the instrumental analysis we're doing and the lyrics. What I like about the song is like it's got a fast tempo, but the song's not heavy, so you don't perceive it as a fast song. The BPM is not slow. It's not slow.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, but the groove is quite empty as well. There's not much going on with the drums, just mainly the bass drum and the snare, like really quietly.
Yeah.
And because it's not heavy and there's not too much drumming, it's not like a heavy groove, you don't perceive it as a fast tempo, but it is. And you have the acoustic guitar leading the song.
Can I just talk just very quickly about the tempo?
Yes.
I didn't even think about that, but you've made a great point, because then it feels so slow and empty at the start, and then suddenly the chorus comes in. It's what's that sound, everybody? And then you're like, hold on, wait, why are all these words coming at me so fast? Like, it shouldn't be this fast. But then you realise that it is. Like, it is actually a fast tempo song.
Because it has that kind of slow vibe atmosphere to it, but it's not really slow. Yeah, and if you listen to other versions of this song, Stevie Nicks and Ozzy Osbourne recorded.
Okay, are they worth putting in the playlist?
Those two you should put. They're pretty cool versions of it. But in this case, I think none of them beats the original, because you know it's someone singing about an experience they had. So Stephen Stills was walking in Sunset Strip, and he saw the so-called riots, which basically what he said was like the young people that were protesting against the curfews. Basically, I think the people who had commercial places in that road, they wanted the bars and the live music venues and all that stuff, the noisy places for young people. They wanted them to close earlier. And then I think there was an official curfew going on, and the young people obviously didn't like it, and apparently they were doing like this funeral for a venue. They were not. It wasn't like apparently a loud protest, whatever. They were just pretending to be at a funeral for this bar that couldn't open after a certain time.
Right.
You know, holding signs and stuff, and the police came with guns, and it was apparently quite violent. And so that is the thing. Is it's interesting to see how you want to bring that feeling to the lyrics. What makes the lyrics brilliant is, first of all, that the title of the song is not in the lyrics. How brilliant is that?
Yeah.
There's no point in the lyrics that he says "for what it's worth."
And as a title, it really makes you. It just makes you think of it. Well, for what's worth? You know, just makes you ponder for that second.
Yeah, and I think the most brilliant thing about those lyrics is it leaves it open to you to adapt to any other context of protest anywhere in the world at any point in time, because it doesn't mention any details of the situation. It doesn't place that situation in LA. Yeah. It doesn't, it's really cool, because you can use that against any wars. You can use that against any government oppression. So basically, because this is not, it's not a political podcast. We're not going to go too far into this, but what I would say is, like, what you see nowadays with the polarization of politics is people tend to think that if someone's saying something that you don't like, so you should hate them, you should be against them, you should be on the other side of the fence. There's only two sides and you need to fight. There's no, and there's a lot of people who think, oh, if you don't agree with me, you shouldn't be able to say what you think at all. You should.
Yeah.
So basically, in the lyrics, he uses the phrase "speaking their minds." So just those young people speaking their minds. Should they face police brutality for speaking their minds? Is that even a riot? So they call it the riots. Is that even a riot? Or is just people just holding signs and saying we do not agree with the curfews?
Yeah.
So was the reaction of the police proportional to what they were doing? So it makes you think about all those things and how many times that has happened all over the world, you know.
Yeah, in history as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really interesting that I believe you can read those lyrics in different contexts and still work. So I think he was. He probably thought of it. The interesting thing about that, Still said that he wrote the song in about 15 minutes. He saw the scene. He walked back home, picked his guitar, played the chord progression, said, "This is it. This is the song," and wrote the lyrics straight away. 15 minutes. Some of the best songs are made like that, isn't it?
Yeah, that's incredible. But I feel like when an artist has an idea and when they've been so inspired by something, they just run with it. And they can just get out their feelings from pen to paper in 15 minutes, you know.
Exactly. It's the only really political song in the album, in my opinion. I didn't notice anything about the other lyrics that are political. They do talk about their views on relationships and stuff.
Yeah.
And some of them are quite light in a way, you know. Can I talk about another song?
Please go ahead. I feel like I've had my say on the music, and you're the lyrics guy, so yeah, take it away.
Yeah. So Hot Dusty Roads, I love that because, like, if you have the folk/country background, maybe people expect you to sing about specific, you know, country life and that kind of stuff. And the lyrics of the first verse is just brilliant. "I don't tell no tales about no hot, dusty roads. I'm a city boy and I stay at home."
So this is literally the opposite. You know that Country Roads song?
Yeah.
This is the opposite. It's like, not take me home to country roads. Keep me in my city house.
But which I believe is still talking about himself, because he was a city boy apparently.
Yeah.
So as far as I know. So the thing is, that's the freedom of rock music, right? Because they are a rock band in the end. When you mix all of those styles, you can only call it rock and roll.
Yeah.
So the thing with that for me is, he's basically saying, am I not entitled to pick like country influence and folk influence and talk about city life? Why not?
Yeah.
You know, that's what music should be about. You just do your own thing. It doesn't have to be... you can stick to the tradition. It's great if you do, but it's great if you don't.
Music's about expression, always.
Expression, yeah, exactly. You can't deny your country influences. On the other hand, you didn't live that lifestyle, so you can't be. It's fake to pretend you're part of it.
Exactly.
But the instruments, the guitar playing, but the guitar playing is part of your life because it comes through the radio, it comes through the records.
Yeah.
So
that's perfect, man. Really well said. Yeah.
It's like I grew up in South America listening to British music. It was there. I couldn't write a song pretending that I was living in London when I was 10.
Yeah.
But musically, I could play like that because that was my influence. So I believe I believe this. It's really cool that he put that in the lyrics. The other one I really liked is "Flying on the Ground is Wrong." Do you know what this song is about?
I don't know what it's about, but I heard the lyrics.
What do you mean? What do you think it means by "flying on the ground"? That's Neil Young's lyrics, by the way.
Drugs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So he's getting high. He's flying on the ground.
Yeah.
So what I find beautiful about it's quite sad because he's talking about losing people. It's interesting because, like, if you go down that route, like taking drugs and stuff, you're not gonna belong to a certain group of people that you used to belong to, which it's totally understandable in my opinion. You normally don't hang out with people who take different substances or whatever. It's just like.
It's like music. A heavy metal guy doesn't hang out with someone who likes rap. generally, you know.
Exactly. So you have the weed guys, the booze guys, the whatever, you know. But I think when he started, experimenting with drugs and going down that route, he lost a lot of friends. So the lyrics are about that. How sad he was for losing those people who were, part of his life.
I think something really interesting about this song, that coupled with what you've just mentioned, is how we know a lot about Neil Young and his drug use. It's quite famously documented about how much he takes and all that stuff. You know, when you watch The Last Waltz by the band, you could literally see the powder on his nostrils, you know. But isn't it funny? This, if I'm not mistaken, this is Neil Young's first ever album, as in first album being part of a band.
Yeah.
Because Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young was after this, 1969, and Neil Young's first album was 72 or something.
Yeah.
So in the first album he's ever written, he's already talking about the detrimental effects of drugs on his life.
Yeah, and losing friends is a big part of it, I imagine.
What I'm saying is that if I'd have had 5 Neil Young albums, and then on the 5th album he starts saying all drugs are bad, you'd be like, okay, you've started taking drugs, you know it's now not for you, what are you telling us? But this is before. But this is do you know what I mean? I just find it crazy that, I suppose what I'm trying to say is I think it's crazy that Neil Young was already had a relationship with drugs at this point. No judgment from me, but
he was already regretting it from the beginning, kind of. It's an interesting thing, but this is a side of this sort of experience that I've never heard anyone talking about in music. The fact that you're losing friends.
Neil had a way with words, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, the title of the song is great and everything. Yeah, that's the other thing. I don't think the lyrics are predictable. The other one that I really liked, "Go and Say Goodbye." How many breakup songs you have out there? We need to mention some names like Taylor Swift kind of stuff. Let's write a breakup song. Not by all means, I'm not against her. I think she's really good at what she does. She's really, really good at what she does. Yeah. So there's a lot of pop songs about breakups. Even when people are really creative with the melodies, even if they can come up with great arrangements and chord progressions, the lyrics are normally the obvious kind of thing. You're talking in first person. Oh, I miss you, or so sad we're breaking up, or I can't stand you anymore, whatever, something like that. This song is about this guy talking to his mate, because his mate wrote a letter to break up with his girlfriend, and he's like, dude, don't do that. Go there and tell her in her face. You can't do that.
Right. Okay.
It's super cool. It's like, You
won't go and say goodbye. Yeah.
He says in the lyrics, don't run away and hide. Because he's trying to avoid dealing with her when she's crying or sad or mad or whatever's going to happen when they break up. But this good friend is telling him, you got to go there and tell her. Yeah. You can't just drop a letter and run away, which something that you can experience in real life. If I was in a situation like that, I would tell my friend, like, you should go and talk to her. You can't do that. You can't just drop a letter and disappear. So that's the thing. I've never heard any lyrics like that. So it makes it so real, doesn't it? It's a real story. It probably is a real story, even if it's not. It sounds like it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think it's just interesting how the album doesn't. I mean, just from the examples you've given, we know that the album doesn't have a clear. It's not a concept album. It doesn't have a clear theme running through it. But already we've looked at the politics of the '60s and one specific event, and it's quite interesting that For What It's Worth was recorded at the separate studio.
Yeah,
I wonder if they and it does stand out to me. And not in a bad way, but it does feel. I mean, even the volume. If you play track
the mix
one,
is quite different.
And the volume, the master volume of For What It's Worth compared to the other tracks is more. So it already stands out like that. Then you've got the kind of a different approach to a romance song with Go and Say Goodbye. Then you've got the talk of drugs on Flying on the Ground Is Wrong. It's just a nice eclectic mix of themes that probably weren't prevalent at those times.
Yeah,
politics were prevalent, obviously, but drugs and a different way to look at a breakup. So
exactly.
really interesting stuff.
it's like talking about love and breakups in a non-obvious way.
Yeah, exactly. One other aspect I just want to talk about musically was the psychedelic sound, because I feel that with all these different styles blended, it feels like it feels like the psychedelic aspect was a byproduct of it. I don't think they were trying to sound psychedelic, but
Yeah,
yet that intro, for what it's worth, just has so much space there,
yeah,
so much freedom to just to let the music express itself.
yeah,
And even what else did I see? Oh, do you know what, that part, track 4, nowadays Clancy can't even sing.
yeah.
How have you did you clock that the whole song is just it's going from 4/4 to like 6/8 or 3/4 to a
Yeah,
waltz?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
It
it's there,
goes through a
dun,
waltz for
dun,
the
dun,
chorus,
dun,
isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah,
dun, 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 dun,
it's a
dun,
really
dun, dun,
psychedelic
dun,
waltz as
and it
well.
just goes back and forward. Then it goes back to 4/4 for a verse. Then for
Yeah,
the chorus, it
and
goes.
then 3/4 for the waltz.
That's kind
Yeah,
of psychedelic. I
yeah,
was listening to it today, and I was like, "Oh, hold on, oh, we're going back to the waltz now. Fine, sure."
yeah. And
Um,
it's yeah, it's a clever way of arranging it.
yeah,
And also, again, the lyrics interesting because that's about Neil Young's frustration with not achieving what he wanted as a musician. How cool is that?
there you go.
Until that point, see, until
And
that album.
what's the title about? It's so funny nowadays.
Clancy, I think,
Clancy,
was a friend of his from school.
right? Okay.
I don't know. I don't know the. I think something is a friend from school. I don't remember why it's in the title. But it's I like when he says to sing in the meaning of what's in my mind before I can take home what's rightfully mine. So really
Nice.
cool. So
Yeah,
he's talking about like he wants to be true in his music. He doesn't. I interpret this as like I don't want to just go fully commercial and do what people expect from me. I
yeah,
want to do what I believe is the right thing to do, and I still want to be successful with this.
yeah.
It's a really difficult path to take, but you know he did it brilliantly.
That's a good point. So I think that's it for the music and lyrics. I mean, unless you have
Yeah,
anything more to say about lyrics. I mean, the writers of the album, it's Stills and Young working
yeah,
together, well, separately and together. Interestingly, Richie Furay sings on quite a few tracks. He sings
yeah,
on tracks 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, 10. So he sings on quite a lot of them. And actually, Neil Young only sings on 2,
hmm,
Burned and Out of My Mind. So
yeah.
Neil hadn't quite found his frontman voice yet, but as you said, that led us to a nicer. We get his guitar tone basically, don't we?
Yeah,
Instead,
exactly. It's just amazing guitar playing in every song and never predictable, you know.
not at all. That's
Uh,
completely
mm,
what I said at the start. How each song has a different effect on it.
yeah,
Each guitar. Excellent, cool. Well, let's finish off with just talking about what this album did. You know, I don't think I think we're under no illusions. We never try and blow smoke up an album's arse unless it's worth it. So we're not going to
yeah,
sit here and say this changed music forever. It isn't a Sergeant Pepper. It isn't a Pet Sounds. But what it did do was, as I said in the opening bump, was it really did start the journey of commercialized, easy to listen to pop music, starting to develop a personality,
yeah,
starting to move away from your standard romantic lyrics.
yeah,
You're figuring in politics, you're figuring in drug abuse, you're figuring in an anti-romance kind of vibe. But what this album did do, as I said, is push more into what we know of this 70s folk rock. Your Eagles, your Jackson Brown, your James Taylor, the singer-songwriter folk rock kind of era that ushered America in through the 70s, that
yeah,
became very prevalent. You've got the pioneering of country rock. So country rock now is probably what I think it's. I read something that it's the most profitable and most expensive genre of music in the world,
yeah,
because hundreds and thousands of Americans love their country, and now that it's been rockified, sorry, not love their country as in USA, as in
yeah,
love their
yeah.
country music.
The country music.
I'm sure
I
they love
know.
USA as well, yeah.
Yeah,
But what this did is it took the lyrics of folk,
yeah,
it took the warmth of country. And that when I was doing my research and reading, someone read there was a reviewer who said this album takes country's warmth And I thought that's just perfect because the country aspects are warm, the guitar tones are familiar, the chord progressions are really agreeable and accessible.
Yeah.
They sound lovely. It's a warm feeling, but
Yeah.
then you add the edge that rock delivers, the crazy psychedelia moments, Neil Young's shredding guitars, the drug abuse lyrics, and you mix that all together, and you've got your beginnings of country rock.
Exactly, and the lyrics in this case, that's when they're opening a completely different avenue for country, if you consider them as country in a way, because the lyrics are the opposite of country music.
Good point. Yeah,
very,
excellent.
very, very different.
Cool. Anything else left to say?
No, well, we could talk about this all day, but we've got to end at some point.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, we'll finish off with my monologue then, as I chose this album. And you know, let's talk about why I chose the album. Yeah. Do you know what I said? I said that as if I've got a great story prepared. I don't. My brother showed me Buffalo Springfield once. I think it was probably For What It's Worth, the song. And yeah, when I heard For What It's Worth, I thought this is exactly how I expect it to sound. It sounds like Neil Young. It sounds like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. The minute track 2 starts, that's when I went, oh, hello. What's going on here? Okay, this is not what I expected. Let's see where this goes. And the result has been fantastic because I loved it. I really, really loved it. You know, most songs I really enjoyed. There's just something different around every corner. But yeah, anyway,
thanks for bringing this album to my life, man.
No problem. Do you know what? Did you enjoy it?
Fucking loved it.
It's brilliant, isn't it? It really is good. Okay, cool. Right, well, let's finish off then. This album sounds and feels like a cornerstone in music history. To me, it feels like the catalyst between classic 60s pop, like the Beatles and the Kinks, and established 70s folk rock, like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Eagles, and Neil Young. The music contains enough catchy melodies, sing-along choruses, memorable hooks, and agreeable chord progressions to entice and satisfy any generic pop music fan, yet contains several boundary-pushing elements. Whilst kept to a minimum and used extremely tastefully, these little characteristics of the album would be enough to test the boundaries of folk and pop to move them together in a stronger force going forward. The blending of styles blurred the lines. One song sounds like it's a proto-Neil Young track. Another song could be taken from an early Beatles album. One song sounds like it's from a 50s doo-wop compilation, and another sounds like it's been injected with Cream's recent blues rock medicine. Whilst these individual moments may harken back to an already established artist or a decade gone by, the characteristics and personality that each musician in Buffalo Springfield brings to the table solidifies that this is the work of a unique band with unique ideas and a solidified, established direction of travel. The record is an easy to listen to pleasure of an album, but if you take the time to dig below the surface of the simple pop folk exterior, you can find a multitude of musical wealth and innovation ready to inspire countless other rock, folk, blues and country musicians.
Amazing. I love the monologues, man. Great stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, I you know me, I love getting all my thoughts down into a big, nice big monologue. There we go. But yeah, that sums up for me, man. It's like it feels like the start of something, doesn't it? And I'm sure in a year or so we'll come and do the second one because I really enjoyed this. We'll have to add the second and the third one to the list.
Down the list.
But yeah, cool. Right. Well, that concludes another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast, so thank you for joining us. As I said at the start of the show, if you're listening on Apple, Spotify or Amazon, do us a favour, go down, give us a review, hit the 5 stars and it helps us so much. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit like and subscribe to stay up to date with the content. Until then, we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks for being with us one more time. Keep on rocking, everyone, and don't do anything I wouldn't do.
And as usual, guys, take care and long live rock and roll.